The sun was just coming up over London when Prince William opened his eyes. Today was a very important day. He and his family would attend a big ceremony to mark 100 years since the signing of a peace treaty that had helped shape modern Europe. William knew all eyes would be on him and his family. He got out of bed quietly, trying not to wake Kate, who was still sleeping. In the bathroom, he looked at himself in the mirror. At 42 years old, he carried the responsibility of being the future king with a calm dignity that people respected. He splashed cold water on his face and took a deep breath. This was not just any appearance. World leaders and important people from over 50 countries would be there. In the kitchen, William was surprised to find Prince George already awake and eating breakfast. At 11 years old, George was growing tall and looking more like his father every day. Couldn't sleep? William asked, pouring himself some tea. George shook his head. I was thinking about what you told me yesterday, about how being royal means we represent more than just ourselves. William smiled, feeling proud. He sat down next to his son. That's right. But it doesn't mean you can't be yourself too. That's what people connect with, our human side. Soon, the rest of the family was awake. Princess Charlotte, 9 years old and full of confidence, was helping her mother pick out shoes to match her blue dress. Prince Louis, the youngest at 6, was running around with endless energy, making everyone laugh. Louis, please sit down and eat your breakfast, Kate said, trying to sound firm but smiling. Louis was known for his cheeky behavior at public events, and they were all hoping he would be on his best behavior today. Will there be other children there? Louis asked, finally sitting down. Not many, William answered, but there will be lots to see. The abbey is over 700 years old, with beautiful paintings and statues. And we must remember to be respectful, Charlotte added in a grown-up voice that made both her parents exchange amused glances. As they got dressed in their formal clothes, William helped Louis with his tie, while Kate fixed Charlotte's hair. George was already dressed perfectly, looking serious about his role. You all look wonderful, William said, standing back to admire his family. Kate was elegant in a blue coat dress with a matching hat. The children were dressed in coordinating outfits that were formal but still suitable for their ages. Outside, rain clouds were gathering, typical British weather even in spring. Royal aides rushed around with umbrellas and last-minute schedule changes. William reviewed the day's program one more time. The ceremony at Westminster Abbey, then a reception at Buckingham Palace, followed by a special tree planting to symbolize peace. Are you nervous? Kate asked quietly, coming to stand beside him at the window. William thought for a moment. Not nervous exactly. I just want to get it right. My speech needs to honor the past, but also look to the future. Kate straightened his tie, a small gesture of support she had done countless times. You always find the right words, and we'll be right there with you. The royal family gathered in the entrance hall of their apartment in Kensington Palace. Royal protection officers were waiting to escort them to the cars. William looked at his watch. They were right on schedule. Remember, he said to his children, kneeling down to their level, today is about showing respect for history and for all the countries that will be represented. But it's also about being ourselves, the best versions of ourselves. And no funny faces during the national anthem, Kate added, looking directly at Louis, who grinned back innocently. As they walked toward the waiting cars, William felt a sense of purpose and pride. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as a family, and as representatives of the British monarchy that had endured for over 1,000 years. The royal motorcade moved smoothly through the London streets. Inside the lead car, Prince William watched as crowds of people lined the route. Many waved small British flags, and some held up signs welcoming the royal family. William smiled and waved back, though he knew most couldn't see through the tinted windows. Look how many people came out to see us, Charlotte said, pressing her nose against the window. Even in the rain. She was right. A light drizzle had started, But it didn't stop the crowds. People stood under umbrellas, determined to catch a glimpse of the royal cars. "They're not just here for us," William explained gently. "They're here because they care about our country's history. This peace treaty changed the lives of their grandparents and great-grandparents." In the second car, Kate was helping Louis with his seatbelt, which he had managed to twist. George sat quietly, watching the scenes outside with thoughtful eyes. "Will I have to shake hands with people?" Louis asked, suddenly looking worried. "Only a few," Kate assured him. "Just remember to say pleased to meet you and smile. You have a wonderful smile." This made Louis grin, showing the gap where he had recently lost a tooth. Kate couldn't help but smile back. Even on formal occasions, Louis brought joy with his natural cheerfulness. As they approached Westminster Abbey, the cars slowed down. The ancient church stood tall and grand against the gray sky. Its stone walls had witnessed hundreds of years of history, coronations, royal weddings, and important ceremonies like today's. Royal guards stood at attention as the cars pulled up to the entrance. Photographers and news cameras were positioned behind barriers, ready to capture the family's arrival. William took a deep breath. This was the moment when they would be most visible. "Ready?" he asked his family as the car door was opened by a staff member. William stepped out first, nodding politely to the officials waiting to greet them. Then he turned to help Kate out of the car. She emerged gracefully, her blue dress catching the light despite the cloudy day. The children followed, standing straight and remembering their training. The crowd cheered as the family was now in full view. William placed a gentle hand on George's shoulder, guiding him toward the Abbey's entrance. Kate held Louis's hand firmly, while Charlotte walked beside them with perfect posture. Inside the Abbey, the space was filled with important people from around the world. Prime ministers, presidents, and other royals stood in small groups, talking quietly. The high ceiling and stained glass windows made everyone speak in hushed tones, as if they were in a library. "Your Royal Highness," said the British Prime Minister, approaching with an extended hand. "Thank you for joining us on this historic day." William shook his hand warmly. "The pleasure is ours. My family and I understand the importance of remembering such pivotal moments in our shared history." As they moved through the crowd, William made sure to keep track of his children. George was doing well, standing tall beside him and observing everything with interest. Charlotte was charming everyone she met, curtsying perfectly as she had practiced. Louis was staying close to Kate, occasionally hiding behind her dress when someone new approached him. The Archbishop of Canterbury, in his official robes, came to greet them. "The ceremony will begin in 15 minutes, he informed them. "We have reserved seats for you in the front row." A royal aide led them to their places. The wooden seats had small cushions with the royal crest. William helped Louis onto his seat, making sure he was comfortable. The Abbey was filling up quickly now, with over 500 guests taking their places. "Remember," William whispered to his children, "this isn't just about sitting still and being quiet. Listen to the speeches. Try to understand why we're here. Someday, you'll be the ones carrying on these traditions." Kate reached over and squeezed his hand. She knew how important it was to William that their children understood their heritage and responsibilities. The organ began to play, signaling that the ceremony was about to start. The grand music filled the huge space, and everyone fell silent. William straightened his tie one last time and sat up tall, ready to represent the British monarchy at this important moment in history. The ceremony began with a procession of flags from all the countries that had signed the peace treaty 100 years ago. Each flag was carried by a soldier in formal uniform. The bright colors of the flags stood out against the dark stone walls of Westminster Abbey. Prince Louis's eyes grew wide as he watched the flags pass by. He tugged on his mother's sleeve and whispered something that made Kate smile and nod. William noticed this small exchange and felt grateful for Kate's patience with their youngest child, who found it hardest to sit still during long events. After the flags came the official speeches. The Prime Minister spoke first, talking about how the treaty had changed Europe for the better. Then leaders from other countries shared what the treaty meant to their nations. Some spoke in English, while others used their own languages with translators helping everyone understand. Charlotte leaned closer to George and whispered, "How many more speeches are there?" George checked the program in his hand. "7 more," he whispered back. Charlotte tried not to sigh too loudly. William understood how the children felt. He remembered being their age and finding these ceremonies very long. But he also knew that being patient during official events was part of their royal duty. He caught Charlotte's eye and gave her an encouraging smile. Louis was now counting the stained glass windows he could see from his seat. Kate gently redirected his attention to the ceremony when he began to count a bit too loudly. She took a small notebook and pencil from her purse and handed them to Louis, who happily began to draw. Finally, it was William's turn to speak. He stood up and walked to the podium at the front of the abbey. The lights seemed bright, and hundreds of eyes watched him. But William had done this many times before. He took a deep breath and began his speech. 100 years ago, our ancestors came together after years of conflict to sign a treaty that would bring peace to our nations, William said in a clear, strong voice. Today, we honor not just a piece of paper with signatures, but the spirit of cooperation that has helped our countries grow stronger together. As William spoke, he noticed his family watching him with pride. Even Louis had stopped drawing to listen to his father. This gave William confidence as he continued to talk about peace, history, and hope for the future. In a world that sometimes seems divided, events like today remind us of what we can achieve when we work together, William said as he ended his speech. And it is my sincere hope that 100 years from now, our great-grandchildren will gather to celebrate not just this treaty, but many more achievements of international friendship. The audience applauded as William returned to his seat. Kate squeezed his hand, her eyes telling him he had done well. George looked at his father with new respect, beginning to understand the important role he would one day inherit. After William's speech, a children's choir from local schools filed into the center of the abbey. They wore simple white shirts and dark pants or skirts. When they began to sing, their clear young voices filled the huge space with a song about peace and friendship. Charlotte was captivated by the choir. She loved music and sang in her school choir too. Louis stopped fidgeting and listened with his mouth slightly open in wonder. The song was in several languages, representing the countries that had signed the treaty. As the choir sang, sunlight suddenly broke through the clouds outside and streamed through the stained glass windows. Colorful light painted the stone floors of the abbey, making the moment feel magical. William noticed this perfect timing and thought it felt like a good sign. When the song ended, there was a moment of silence before everyone began to applaud. The choir members smiled, clearly proud of their performance. One small girl in the front row of the choir caught Louis's eye and waved. Louis waved back enthusiastically until Kate gently lowered his arm. The Archbishop stood up next and invited everyone to observe a minute of silence to remember all those who had lived through the difficult times before the peace treaty. The entire abbey grew quiet. Even Louis seemed to understand the importance of this moment, sitting very still with his hands folded in his lap. During this quiet minute, William thought about his grandmother, the late Queen Elizabeth II, and how she had taught him about the importance of remembering history. She had lived through so many historic moments herself. William hoped he was carrying on her legacy well. After the minute of silence ended, the ceremony continued with the unveiling of a special plaque to mark the treaty's anniversary. William was invited to join other world leaders at the front of the abbey for this important moment. As he walked forward, he felt the weight of history around him in the ancient building. The plaque was covered with a blue velvet cloth. The Archbishop nodded to William and the other leaders, and together they pulled the cloth away. The plaque was made of polished bronze with words in 5 different languages. Cameras flashed as the historic moment was captured for newspapers and television around the world. Back in their seats, Louis tugged at Kate's sleeve. "I'm hungry," he whispered, not quite quietly enough. Several people nearby smiled, including an older diplomat who winked at the young prince. Children being children, even royal ones, was something everyone could understand. Kate reached into her small handbag and discreetly pulled out a tiny box of raisins, her emergency snack for Louis during long events. She slipped it into his hand, and he ate them one by one, counting softly to himself. Charlotte was watching everything with keen eyes. She noticed how different leaders greeted each other, some with warm hugs, others with formal handshakes. She was learning about international relations without even realizing it. When she saw a young girl about her age, the daughter of an African president, sitting across the aisle, Charlotte gave a small wave and received a shy smile in return. George sat up straighter when he noticed the cameras occasionally pointing toward their family. Though only 11 years old, he already understood that images of him would someday be in history books. His father had explained that being watched was part of their royal duty, but also that it was important to stay true to yourself despite the cameras. The final part of the ceremony involved signing a new pledge to continue the spirit of the original treaty. Leaders took turns stepping forward to add their signatures to a large document. When it was William's turn, he walked confidently to the signing table. He took the special pen, paused for a moment to appreciate the significance, and signed his name clearly. As the ceremony drew to a close, the choir sang once more. This time, they performed the British national anthem, God Save the King. William, Kate, and their children stood respectfully, with George and Charlotte singing along with the words they knew well. Even Louis tried to join in, though he mixed up some of the words in an admirable way that made Kate bite her lip to keep from smiling too obviously. When the final notes faded away, there was a moment of stillness before the Archbishop announced that the formal ceremony was complete. Now came the part that William knew would be challenging for the children, the receiving line. They would need to stand and greet many important people before they could move on to the reception at Buckingham Palace. Remember to shake hands firmly, William whispered to George as they got into position. And it's okay to just say, pleased to meet you, if you don't know what else to say. Kate straightened Charlotte's dress and checked that Louis's tie was still properly in place. You've all done so wonderfully so far, she told them quietly. Just a little longer, and then we can have proper food at the palace. The mention of food brightened Louis's face immediately. Will there be cake? He asked hopefully. I believe there might be, Kate answered with a smile. But first, we need to be polite to all our guests. The royal family lined up in order of succession. William first, then George, followed by Charlotte, Louis, and Kate at the end. As the foreign dignitaries began to file past, William set the example by greeting each one warmly, remembering names and countries with impressive accuracy, a skill he had learned from his grandmother. George tried his best to copy his father, giving a small bow when appropriate and saying, pleased to meet you, just as he had been taught. Charlotte curtsied prettily to each person, while Louis managed an enthusiastic handshake with anyone who approached him, sometimes forgetting to let go until Kate gently reminded him. One elderly statesman from Japan bent down to Louis's level and spoke to him directly. Young Prince, when I met your great-grandmother many years ago, she told me that the future of any nation depends on its children. I can see the British future is in good hands. Louis didn't completely understand the man's words, but he recognized the kindness in his voice and gave him a special smile. The genuine, unguarded smile of childhood that no royal training could teach. After greeting all the important guests, the royal family was led outside where several cars waited to take them to Buckingham Palace. The rain had stopped, and weak sunshine broke through the clouds. A crowd of people had gathered behind barriers, hoping to see the royals up close. Should we walk over and say hello? William asked a royal aide, looking at the excited crowd. The aide checked his watch. We have 15 minutes before we need to be at the palace. It's your choice, sir. William turned to Kate. What do you think? The children have been sitting still for so long. Kate nodded. I think a quick walkabout would be nice. The people have been waiting in the rain. William made the decision. Let's say hello to some of them. George, Charlotte, Louise, remember to accept flowers if people offer them, and say thank you. The family walked toward the barrier where people were waving and calling out their names. Security officers walked close by, watching carefully. When the crowd saw the family approaching, they cheered loudly. An elderly woman held out a small bunch of flowers to Charlotte. "These are for you, Princess. You look so pretty today." Charlotte took the flowers with a perfect curtsy. "Thank you very much. They smell lovely," she said, remembering her manners. George shook hands with several people, looking them in the eye, just as his father had taught him. One young boy about George's age asked, "What's it like to be a prince?" George thought for a moment before answering. "It's a big responsibility, but I have my family to help me." Louis was enjoying all the attention. He waved enthusiastically at everyone, sometimes with both hands. When a little girl handed him a small teddy bear wearing a Union Jack t-shirt, his face lit up. "Look, Mummy," he called to Kate, holding up his gift. Kate smiled and reminded him, "What do we say when someone gives us something?" "Thank you very much," Louis said to the little girl, who beamed with happiness. William moved along the line, shaking hands and chatting briefly with people. One man told him, "Your speech was excellent, Your Royal Highness. My grandfather fought in the war before the treaty. He would be proud to see this day." "Thank you," William replied sincerely. "It's important we remember their sacrifice and continue their work for peace." As Kate greeted people, many commented on how lovely the children were. "They're a credit to you," one woman said. "They have their moments," Kate answered with a warm laugh that made the crowd laugh too. This human touch was why people loved the royal family. They could be both regal and relatable. After 15 minutes, the royal aide signaled that it was time to leave. The family waved goodbye to the crowd and walked to their waiting cars. Inside the car, Louis clutched his new teddy bear tightly. "Can he come to the palace too?" he asked. "Of course he can," William answered. "He's part of the family now. What will you name him?" Louis thought hard. "Treaty," he announced, making everyone laugh. Even though he was young, he had picked up on the important word of the day. The drive to Buckingham Palace was short. As they passed through the famous gates, tourists took pictures of the royal cars. Inside the palace grounds, staff members lined up to welcome them. The grand reception was being held in the State Ballroom, the largest room in the palace. When the family walked in, a footman announced their arrival. His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, Her Royal Highness, the Princess of Wales, His Royal Highness Prince George, Her Royal Highness Princess Charlotte, and His Royal Highness Prince Louis. Everyone in the room turned to look at them and applauded. The ballroom was decorated with flowers and flags from all the countries represented at the ceremony. Tables with white cloths held fancy food and drinks. A small orchestra played soft music in the corner. William guided his family through the crowd, stopping to introduce his children to some of the most important guests. George and Charlotte remembered to bow and curtsy at the right times. Louis stayed close to Kate, still holding his teddy bear named Treaty. The French president approached with his wife. "Your children are charming," he said to William and Kate, "and your speech was most inspiring." "Thank you," William replied. "We're teaching our children that friendships between nations are just as important as friendships between people." A waiter offered a tray of small sandwiches to the children. Louis took one eagerly, while George and Charlotte remembered to say thank you first. Kate watched proudly as her children handled themselves well in this formal setting. As William moved through the reception, he kept an eye on his family. This balance between royal duty and family life was something he worked hard to maintain. He saw Charlotte talking to a group of diplomats' children who had been invited, while George was listening to the Prime Minister explain something about the treaty. As the reception continued, Louis began to get tired. The excitement of the day and all the sitting still during the ceremony had worn him out. Kate noticed him yawning and rubbing his eyes. "I think someone needs a little break," she said, leading him to a small side room where royal children had been taking breaks for generations. A palace staff member had already set up some toys and books for the younger guests. "Can I stay with Louis?" Charlotte asked, showing her caring nature. "I'll make sure he's okay." Kate smiled at her daughter's thoughtfulness. "That would be very helpful. I need to go back to the reception for a little while. A staff member will be just outside if you need anything." In the main ballroom, William was speaking with the German Chancellor about climate change, a cause close to his heart. George stood beside his father, listening carefully. William occasionally included George in the conversation, helping him learn how to talk with world leaders. "Your son seems very interested in environmental issues," the Chancellor said to William. "Yes, he's learning about it in school," William replied. "George, would you like to tell the Chancellor about your class project on protecting oceans?" George spoke clearly, though a bit shyly. "We're studying how plastic hurts sea animals. Our class is writing letters to companies asking them to use less plastic in their products." The Chancellor looked impressed. "That is excellent, young prince. Perhaps you will lead on these issues someday, just like your father." Meanwhile, in the side room, Charlotte was reading a book to Louis. She did different voices for each character, making Louis laugh despite his tiredness. His teddy bear Treaty sat beside him on the sofa. "One more story, please," Louis begged when Charlotte finished the book. "Okay, but then we should go back to the party," Charlotte said. "There's supposed to be a special dessert soon." Louis perked up at the mention of dessert. "What kind of dessert?" "I heard it's ice cream shaped like flags," Charlotte whispered, as if sharing a big secret. Back in the ballroom, Kate was speaking with the Queen of Denmark, who had known William since he was a boy. "Your children are growing up so beautifully," the Queen said. "I remember when William was Louis's age, running around at events just like this." Kate smiled. "He's been telling me stories about those days. It helps him understand when the children get restless." "That's the circle of life in royal families," the Queen nodded wisely. "The lessons we learn as children help us become better parents." A palisade approached Kate. "Excuse me, Your Royal Highness. The tree planting ceremony will begin in 15 minutes. Should I gather the children?" "Thank you, I'll get them myself," Kate replied. She excused herself from the Queen and went to find Charlotte and Louis in the side room. When she opened the door, she found both children now fast asleep on the sofa, with the book still open on Charlotte's lap. Kate stood for a moment, watching them sleep. Even on busy royal days, they were still just children who needed rest. She gently woke them up. "Time for the next special part of the day," she said softly. Louis rubbed his eyes. "The ice cream flags." "Not yet," Kate laughed. "First we're going to plant a special tree in the palace garden. Then there will be dessert." Charlotte straightened her dress as she stood up. "Is it like the oak tree that great-grandmother Elizabeth planted?" "Yes, exactly like that," Kate said, impressed by Charlotte's knowledge of royal traditions. "This tree will grow for hundreds of years and remind people of today's celebration." Kate helped Louis fix his hair, which had become messy during his nap. "Don't forget Treaty," she reminded him, pointing to the teddy bear. Louis grabbed his bear, and the three of them walked back to the reception, where William and George were waiting near the doors to the garden. "Good nap?" William asked with a smile, noticing Louis's slightly crumpled clothes. "Charlotte read me stories," Louis said. "And now we're going to plant a tree and then eat ice cream flags." William raised an eyebrow at Kate, who shrugged with a smile. "Something to look forward to," she said quietly. The royal family assembled at the doors as the palace staff prepared to lead all the important guests outside for the tree planting ceremony. This would be the final official part of the day's celebrations, a symbol of growing peace for future generations. George stood tall beside his father, feeling grown up and important. Charlotte held Louis's hand, ready to help him with the planting. And William and Kate exchanged a proud glance, pleased with how well their children had handled this long and historic day. The palace gardens looked beautiful in the afternoon light. The rain had stopped completely, and the sun made the wet grass and flowers sparkle. A red carpet led from the palace doors to a spot where a small hole had been dug for the special tree. All the important guests gathered in a half circle around the planting spot. Palace gardeners stood nearby, holding a young oak tree about 3 feet tall. Its roots were wrapped in burlap, and its leaves were a fresh, bright green. A royal aide handed William a golden shovel. This was not a regular garden tool, but a ceremonial one that had been used for important plantings for over 100 years. The handle was smooth from all the royal hands that had held it before. Today we plant this oak tree as a living symbol of peace and friendship between our nations, William said to the gathered crowd. Just as this tree will grow strong over the coming decades and centuries, so too will the bonds between our countries continue to grow and strengthen. William then turned to his children. George, Charlotte, and Louis will help plant this tree, representing the future generations who will continue to nurture peace long after we are gone. He handed the golden shovel to George first. George carefully scooped some soil and placed it in the hole where the tree would go. He then passed the shovel to Charlotte, who did the same. When it was Louis's turn, William held the shovel with him, helping him scoop a small amount of soil. "Now the tree, please," William said to the gardeners. The head gardener stepped forward with the oak tree. Together, William and all 3 children helped place it in the prepared hole. Even little Louis pushed some dirt around the roots, getting his hands dirty, but not minding at all. Kate stepped forward with a silver watering can. "Water helps things grow," she explained to Louis as she handed him the can. "Just like friendship needs care to grow strong." With help from his mother, Louis poured water around the base of the tree. Some water splashed on his shoes, but nobody minded. This natural moment made the formal guests smile and relax. The head gardener then presented a small plaque that would sit beside the tree. It read, "Oak of Peace, planted on the 100th anniversary of the Treaty of Harmony by the Prince of Wales and his children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis." Photographers captured the moment as the family stood proudly beside their newly planted tree. In years to come, people would visit the palace gardens and see how much the tree had grown, remembering this historic day. "When you are king someday," William said quietly to George, "this tree will be tall and strong." George looked up at the small tree, trying to imagine it big and old. "And when George is king, I'll bring my children to see it," Charlotte added, showing she understood the long history of their family. "And I'll climb it," Louis announced, making everyone nearby laugh. As the tree planting ceremony ended, palace staff invited all the guests back inside for the final part of the reception, the dessert that Louis had been waiting for. Back in the ballroom, waiters wheeled in carts with special ice cream treats. Just as Charlotte had told Louis, the ice cream was shaped like different country flags, made with colored fruit flavors. Louis's eyes grew wide with excitement. "Look, that's our flag." He pointed to the red, white, and blue ice cream of the British flag. "And there's Germany," George said, pointing to the black, red, and gold stripes. "And France," Charlotte added, finding the blue, white, and red. The children were given small plates with ice cream flags from several countries. Louis immediately started eating his, getting a bit of ice cream on his nose. Kate gently wiped it away with a napkin. Many of the foreign dignitaries smiled at the children enjoying their treats. This sweet ending to the formal day reminded everyone that even at the highest levels of government and royalty, simple joys were universal. William watched his family with pride. They had all performed their royal duties perfectly today. From the serious ceremony at Westminster Abbey to this lighter moment with ice cream. Public service was not always easy, especially with young children, but days like today showed why it mattered. As Louis finished his ice cream, he tugged on William's sleeve. "Daddy, will our tree grow as big as the one at our house?" he asked. "Even bigger," William assured him, because it's being planted with the good wishes of people from all around the world. Louis nodded, satisfied with this answer. He looked down at his teddy bear Treaty, who had watched the whole day's events from Louis's arms or pockets. Treaty thinks this was a good day, he announced seriously. William smiled and knelt down to his youngest son's level. Treaty is right, he said. This was a very good day indeed. As the afternoon went on, the reception began to wind down. Many guests had long journeys home and needed to leave. William and Kate stood near the palace doors, saying goodbye to each important visitor. The children joined them, showing they were learning the art of proper farewells. "Thank you for including the young ones in today's ceremony," said the Spanish king as he shook William's hand. "It reminds us all why peace matters for their future." George, standing tall beside his father, gave a perfect bow to the Spanish king. Charlotte curtsied gracefully, while Louis attempted a small bow that turned into more of a bounce. The Spanish king smiled warmly at all three children. After the last guests had left, only the staff remained, quietly cleaning up the ballroom. William loosened his tie a bit and let out a long breath. These formal days were always tiring, even for adults who were used to them. "You were all wonderful today," Kate told the children. "I think you've earned some free time before dinner. Can we go see our tree again?" Charlotte asked. She had become quite attached to the oak they had planted. "That's a lovely idea," William agreed. "Let's go check on it one more time before we head home." The family walked back outside, but this time without cameras or crowds watching them. Now they could be more relaxed. Louis ran ahead, his energy returning after the long day of being well-behaved. George and Charlotte walked together, talking about their favorite parts of the day. "I liked when the choir sang," Charlotte said. "The little girl in the front row had such a pretty voice." "I liked planting the tree," George replied. "And when Dad gave his speech, he wasn't reading from papers. He knew what to say." William overheard this and felt touched. He worked hard on his speeches, wanting to get them just right. It meant a lot that his son had noticed. They reached the newly planted oak tree, which stood small but proud in its special spot. A palace gardener was just finishing placing the commemorative plaque beside it. "Good evening, Your Royal Highnesses," the gardener said, standing up and bowing slightly. "I've made sure your tree has plenty of water to get it started right." "Thank you," William said. "This tree means a great deal to us." Louis walked right up to the tree and patted its trunk gently. "Grow big and strong," he told it seriously, as if the tree could hear him. Then he introduced his teddy bear. "This is Treaty. He's going to watch you grow." The gardener smiled at Louis's sweet words. "If you'd like, Your Royal Highness," he said to William, "I could send you updates about the tree's progress. Maybe a photograph every year on this date." "That would be wonderful," Kate answered. "The children would love to see how it grows over time." The family stood quietly for a moment, looking at their tree. In the peaceful garden, away from the formal ceremony, they could reflect on what the day had really meant. It wasn't just about speeches and ceremonies, but about building a better world for children like George, Charlotte, and Louis to grow up in. The setting sun cast a golden light across the palace gardens. Louis yawned, tired from the big day. William picked him up, and Louis rested his head on his father's shoulder. "Time to head home, I think," William said, looking at Kate. She nodded, noticing that all three children were showing signs of tiredness now that the excitement was over. Even George and Charlotte, who had been so grown up all day, were clearly ready for a quiet evening at home. As they walked back toward the palace, a staff member approached with news. "Your Royal Highness, the car is ready whenever you wish to depart." And His Majesty the King called to say he watched the ceremony on television. "He asked me to tell you he was very proud." William smiled at the message from his father. King Charles had wanted to attend, but had been on an official visit to Australia. It meant a lot that he had watched from afar. "Please thank His Majesty and tell him we'll call them tomorrow," William replied. The children will want to tell their grandfather all about their day. In the car on the way back to Kensington Palace, Louis fell asleep almost immediately, still clutching Treaty the teddy bear. Charlotte leaned against Kate, her eyes heavy. Even George, who tried so hard to be grown-up, rested his head against the window, watching London pass by in the evening light. William and Kate exchanged a look over their sleepy children's heads, a look of accomplishment and understanding. Days like today were challenging but important. They were teaching their children about duty, history, and their unique place in the world, all while trying to give them as normal a childhood as possible within royal life. Back at Kensington Palace, the family settled into their private apartment. Away from the public eye, they could finally relax completely. The children changed out of their formal clothes into comfortable pajamas, and William and Kate also switched to casual wear. "I'm hungry again," Louis announced as he padded into the living room in his dinosaur pajamas, Treaty the teddy bear still firmly in his grip. "Dinner will be ready soon," Kate told him. "Maria is making your favorite pasta." Maria, the children's nanny, had prepared a simple dinner, knowing the family would be tired after their big day. She greeted them warmly when they arrived home, and had already drawn baths for the children. In the family kitchen, much smaller and cozier than the grand palace kitchens, William helped set the table while Kate poured drinks. This normal family task felt good after a day of royal ceremony. Here, they were just parents and children, not princes and princesses. "Can we watch the news?" George asked as they sat down to eat. "I want to see if they show us on TV." William checked the time. "We can watch a little bit after dinner," he agreed. "I'm sure they'll have coverage of the day." As they ate their pasta, the children talked about their favorite parts of the day. Charlotte loved the choir singing. George was proud of standing tall during the long ceremony. Louis, his face covered in tomato sauce, declared that the ice cream flags were the best part. "What about you, Dad?" George asked. "What was your favorite part?" William thought for a moment. "I think seeing all of you helping to plant the tree," he said. "That meant a lot to me." "And you, Money?" Charlotte turned to Kate. "I loved watching each of you take on your royal roles so well," Kate said, wiping sauce from Louis's chin. "But my favorite moment was probably when Louis introduced Treaty to the Spanish king." Everyone laughed, remembering how Louis had proudly held up his teddy bear to the surprised king, who had played along perfectly, bowing to the stuffed toy. After dinner, they gathered in the family room to watch a short news report about the day's events. The TV showed clips of the ceremony, William's speech, and the tree planting. "There I am." Louis pointed excitedly when he appeared on screen. "You look very handsome," Kate told him. The reporter called the event a powerful display of international unity and praised the royal family for bringing both dignity and warmth to the historic occasion. There was footage of Charlotte curtsying, George shaking hands with world leaders, and Louis waving to the crowds. "The young royals stole the show," the reporter said, showing that the future of the monarchy is in good hands. William turned off the TV when the report ended. "Time for bed," he announced. "It's been a very long day." "Can Treaty sleep in my bed?" Louis asked, yawning. "Of course," Kate said. "He's part of the family now." William carried a sleepy Louis upstairs while Kate followed with George and Charlotte. In their bedrooms, the children climbed into bed, tired but happy. William and Kate took turns saying goodnight to each child. When they reached Louis's room last, they found him already almost asleep, cuddling his teddy bear. "Treaty had a big day," he murmured sleepily. "Yes, he did," William said softly, kissing his son's forehead. "And he did very well, just like you." With all three children tucked in, William and Kate finally had a moment alone. They sat in their private sitting room with cups of tea, reviewing the day. "They were amazing," Kate said. "Even Louis managed so well, considering how long everything was." William nodded. "I was proud of all of them. My grandmother would have loved seeing them today, especially Charlotte's perfect curtsy." They sat quietly for a moment, thinking of Queen Elizabeth Aya and how she had guided William in his royal role for so many years. "Do you think we're getting the balance right?" William asked after a while, "between preparing them for royal life and letting them be children?" Kate reached for his hand. "I think days like today show that we are," she said. "They understand their duties, but they're still just kids, naming teddy bears and getting excited about ice cream." William smiled, feeling both the weight and the joy of their unique family life. "And someday, when George is king, they'll look back on days like today and understand why it all mattered. And they'll visit that oak tree," Kate added, "and remember how they helped plant it when they were small." Outside their window, the lights of London twinkled in the night. Inside, a future king and his family rested after a day of public service. The balance they worked so hard to maintain, between history and family, duty and love, seemed, at least for this moment, perfectly right. William gave Kate's hand a gentle squeeze. "A good day's work," he said simply. "A very good day," she agreed, "for the country and for our family." And down the hall, 3 sleeping royal children dreamed of flags and trees and treaties, their young minds weaving together the big world of international relations and the small world of teddy bears and ice cream, learning, even in sleep, how to bridge those worlds, just as their father and mother did every day.